Now that we have our latest newsletter item, we're going to use Xano to insert that dynamic data into our first MJML section and see how this really starts coming together. So let's create our first section that's going to end up going into that MJML full, and that is our intro section. So let's create a variable. Let's call it intro section. Be very deliberate what we call things. Now the value where you need to pull our code in. So that's our text that it's going to be. So let's go back to our code, and we want to go to the minified file of this. And so let's just get our code here, copy that. We're just going to paste that into here. So here's all our value that we have, and so you can see the things that we're going to need to replace in here. So we're going to save this first, and then we're going to adjust this. So we're going to add a filter, and the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to grab that, place the newsletter name. So let's go, but before we do that, let's just save this. We need to get the latest newsletter information here. So let's use our stop and debug. We want our latest newsletter. Let's just quickly run this. And we want this so that we can use our subpaths. So we're going to just copy this, which is going to copy our item for us. And we're going to start using it to replace things. Oh, not in the MJM full, in our intro section. And we're going to go replace. That's the filter we're using. We're going to replace our newsletter name. And we're going to replace it with our latest newsletter. And if we hit subpath here, we're going to get our subpath, and we're going to just define, and then it breaks everything down so we can see it really clearly. So what do we want? We just want our name. So we have the name of our newsletter, and we're going to update that. That's our first one that we're going to replace. Now, as this gets bigger, this value section is going to get smaller and smaller, and it's going to be harder to see. So if we really want to just be efficient with what we're doing, let's just go back and forth between our code and this to see what we actually need to replace. I mean, for right now, we can do it really quickly here. We're going to want to go date. So let's replace our date. We're going to have to do something a little different with date here as well. But let's just go to our subpath, and we're going to get a date. And let's define this. And I made this mistake earlier, so let's not do it again. So if we just put a custom date in here, because we're using it to replace text, it expects text. And a date is not a text value. So we have to add an extra filter onto this. And we want to, you know, for different purposes, you might want to change the way a date's formatted anyway, so it's a good practice to format our date. And so that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to use a filter, format timestamp, and we can set the timestamp. You can go further into like timestamps in Xano, but just really quickly, I'm just telling it that we want the year, the month, and the day in number format. And it's going to be time zone is UTC. So we're doing that. What this is just going to provide us with, it's going to provide us with a text date. If we do not do this, we will get an error from Xano saying that you can't add replace, or replace needs to be replaced with text. So we're just kind of avoiding that. I've made that mistake, so now you don't have to. So if we add another filter in here, replace, the next thing we have to replace, let's just take a look. So we'll go back to our code, our intro HTML. So we've done newsletter name, we've done date. Now we need the source for the newsletter image. So we need the URL for the newsletter image. So we're going to go latest newsletter, good old subpath, define, and we want the URL for the image. So main image, URL, there we go. Oh, reverse this. So Control X that. That we want newsletter image. Pretty sure that's what it's called. We can go back and check real quick. Yep, newsletter image. Perfect. Okay, update that. So you see how like because we now have this long anyway, if we start trying to look at our value, we have to scroll sideways and it gets really messy. So it's much easier now at this point to use replace with just our code. So our next thing that we're going to have to do is we have alt text for the image. So we're going to $ alt text. So that's what we're going to replace next. So replace $alt text. Do this latest newsletter subpath. Let's define our subpath. Hit define, and we want the alt text, and we have an alt text field that we're pulling it from. Perfect. So do we have anything left? Alt text. One last thing here is we have a newsletter URL. So this is the URL for the actual newsletter that we have. Now this one here we're going to also use another filter on because we need to combine different things to make this. So we're going to first, let's do the replace. So this is newsletter URL. So we're doing another replace. And we have newsletter URL. And the first thing that we're going to do is we want to get whatever our URL is before the slug. So let's go back to Webflow. And we just want to grab our slug here, or our URL, collection URL. And so we're going to grab that. And we got that there, but we don't need this last bit. And we also want to put our HTTPS. I guess that doesn't transfer. I want to be explicit with it. We're going to use another filter, and that filter is concat. So we're concating, and so we're concating to this text here. And so what we're doing is we want to get that latest newsletter. So we're going to subpath that. Define. And what we want is we want the slug. So we're going to concat the slug to that existing thing. And this particular one, you can create a separator if you want, if it's needed for your concatenation. In this case, we don't want one, so we just leave it blank. And so it'll just put those two things together and give us our full URL. So if we save this, let's move our stop and debug down. And we have our intro section. Save that, and we want to run our intro section. And now we have our intro section here with all of our dynamic data in here. So the last thing I want to do before we wrap this particular episode up, because it's long, is I want to just show you how we're going to put the intro section into the MJM full. So for this, we're actually going to update a variable. So we want to update a variable. So what this does is it takes an existing variable and it updates with whatever we want. So our existing variable is MJM full, And the value we want to put in there is also MJML full. And what we want to do is we want to replace part of the MJML full. And so we're using that replace filter again. So if we go replace, what we're going to replace is we had that brackets to denote our sections. So we're going to replace the intro section, and we're going to replace it with our value in our variable intro section. So basically, we're going to replace that whole chunk with our dynamic variable now. So let's take a quick look at what this looks like now. Oh, let's save this first. Always remember to save. Okay, so we're going to now check our work. So we're going to now look at the MJML full. Save that. So if we run this, we should now get our MJML full with our intro section replaced. So let's just take a look and see what came through. So I'm just going to copy and paste this. So you can see that we already have our first intro paragraph. We can see that it's doing exactly what we need it to be doing, and then we're going to be replacing these other sections along. But this gives you a really good insight onto how we're first going to achieve all of this.